publishing, and I think we had a lot of great interaction, a lot of fabulous tips about the steps to getting published, because, you know, it's when you get this idea for a book, there's kind of some glamour to it. It's like, I'm going to be a movie star, you know,
Yes.
and there's so much that goes into it. You really have to plan on how you're going to measure those costs, the help you're going to get. So I guess one of the things that kind of came up but really didn't came up, and I'm sure both of you ladies can speak to this, is there's a difference between getting published by a publishing house like Penguin, Harper and Harper, Schuster and Schuster, all of those guys, and doing a self-publish. So I guess that's a great place for us to start, because I think self-publishing has made it more accessible for people to get their books done and out. And then sometimes I guess those books sometimes get picked up by publishing houses. But what is the big difference between the two? What's an advantage to self-publishing versus going to a publishing house?
Yeah, I suppose I always feel, you know, there's pros and cons for everything, okay? And a lot of it is down to the individual and how much they want to be involved in the process, and not just the process, but how much their book as it stands, the authentic book that they have, means to them. When you give something to a publishing house, they're a business, they have to make money. They're a commercial entity, so they are only interested in you if they can make money from your book. The reason why you write the book may not be to make money. Most people actually who are writers, they're driven by a higher purpose, and it's not making money is great. It's an added extra if it comes along, but you know, a publishing house looks at it differently, and they may want to make changes to it, take control over it, and the book you get at the end may not be the book that you thought you were going to get. The cover design, you may not be happy with it. You may not be happy with the title change, you know, but they're looking at it to make it commercially viable for them to make money. And again, if the book is wildly successful, great, but you've also lost a lot of your rights. And you could ultimately, you know, your royalty, you're tied into a certain royalty, maybe getting $1, $2 per book. When you self-publish, you maintain full rights, full control of the book. The book you get at the end is a book that you have been involved with every step of the way. It's almost like a birthing process. You're growing your book. You get better at it, just like you get better at writing the more you do it. The more, like, Anna, you've done more than one book now, so you know you're getting through it faster. Things are making more sense. You know, you've learned a lot along the way, and it's the same with self-publishing. For anyone who wants to maintain control of their book, and their book is really, you know, means so much to them, I think keep control of the book. Then if you need to update your book, you know, you're not waiting for editions, for books to sell before they'll actually publish new editions. Even publishing houses make mistakes. And, you know, the worst thing is you can have is having thousands of copies out there, and, you know, you may see some mistakes in it, and you may not just be happy with it. Whereas when you self-publish, you can actually just order copies as you need them. If there's mistakes, get them fixed fast. You're not having to suddenly say, oh, I have 1,000 books to sell. I'm not one for that, because I think, you know, you have to store the books, you have to stock the books. You know, self-publishing, again, it has to work for you. And I always feel, don't ever feel pressurized or pushed into ordering any number of copies. You know, there's a balance between economy and scale and what makes sense. So always, you know, seek sound advice, follow your gut, do your research, know exactly what you're getting. I've seen authors come to me and they've lost control of their books. They don't know what they've given away. They're locked out of their accounts. The accounts aren't in their names. I create accounts in everyone's name, so that basically they can go in at any time, see their sales, make any changes, or I will do them for them. They have their files. Authors, a lot of authors have no rights to their account. They don't know if their book is selling or not. They just have lost the joy and they should have had that joy. And as you can see, I get very animated and passionate, and I speak faster and faster. I'm sorry about that, but it keeps me going. I'm doing this since 2014, And there's times I feel like giving up, or I've no motivation, and then I hear a story and oh, I am charged up, ready to go again, fire in the belly. So
Yes.
again, I don't want authors to make these mistakes. I want to help them as much as I can. And that's why I suppose I offer a service that is a win-win. And I feel I'm just a facilitator to help them. And that's the way my role should be, you know. And if I can't answer a question, I will find out, you know, for an author. And that's why I suppose I love self-publishing. I love giving options.
Awesome. How about you, Sue?
That's great. Everything you said, Orla, I agree with. My husband and I have helped people since about the same time, 2014, help them publish books on their own. And everything you say is absolutely so true. The one thing that I would like to add to that is just that I know I had worked with an author for several years who self-published his book, sort of hybrid publisher, used somebody like yourself to help get the book published. But he really, really did want it to be traditionally published. He thought it was just going to go big, but he wanted to get it out first, and that's what he did. He took the right steps to get it published, like you said, so he had full control. And about a year after it was published, because he had done it right and spent the time to get his platform right and do his own marketing, well, the book was selling enough copies that then a traditional publisher did come to him, and he did go through Wiley and get it traditionally published then. But because he'd already had such success with what he was doing through the self-publishing process, that they made very little changes because they were seeing the success that he already had. So I would agree with everything you say, and say that if somebody wanted to do the traditional publishing route, start with self-publishing, get the book out there, prove to the publishers that there's a market for it, and then you might get picked up by one of them if that's truly, you know, what you want.
Brilliant. Yeah, and it was great to see you as well, Sue, you know, that because a lot of authors think that the work is done once the book is published, but it's not.
No.
You can take the weekend off, but then it's okay.
Right.
What's next?
Right. And that's true even if they traditionally publish. They often think, well, if I traditionally publish, then the publisher will do everything, and that's not
like kind
true.
of like
Yeah,
doesn't work that way. The traditional publisher will get the books into the store, but the author is expected to get the footfall for the store.
Correct.
You know, I don't think that's really explained. And you can imagine if you're getting maybe $1 or $2 per book, that's not a lot of incentive, $1 or $2 per copy sale to get people into a store. And you're trying to get people into stores in all different stores in all different territories. It's exhausting. So they really do need to be, you know, proficient in social media marketing, and, you know, how to actually, you know, build meaningful relationships online for themselves. And authors don't realize that, to be honest. And some authors I come across, they really may have Facebook, but they don't have Twitter, and they just don't, or other platforms, and they just don't know what to do.
Right.
You know?
Another really good suggestion I'd like to make for authors out there that are self-publishing is if you're going with a traditional publisher, especially nonfiction, you have to have a book proposal. Well, when they self-publish, they think, I don't need the book proposal because I'm doing it myself. But there's a lot of value in a self-published nonfiction author creating a book proposal, because it will force them to go through all the steps and to see, you know, and to write this section on marketing, and the section on how to use social media, and the section on, you know, who this book is for, the audience, the target audience. And when they define all of that for themselves, it'll be so much better and easier for them than to market their book. So I think that's a really important step, especially for nonfiction authors, that many just don't do when they're self-published, and that they should do.
You know,
they don't, and they think their book is just going to get discovered on Amazon when you type in psychological thriller, and it doesn't work that way.
Right.
Well, as you were talking, I had it brought to mind the movie Cheaper by the Dozen, and so the main character's wife, I can't remember what her name is, Kate, right? It's Kate. Kate was the mom.
I think so.
Bonnie Hunt. Okay, Bonnie Hunt. We'll just call her Bonnie because Bonnie Hunt. was the actress. And, you know, she goes on this book tour, and you know, they made it seem like it was, you know, something easy to do. And, you know, you just find an agent, and the agent does, you know, gets all of these bookings for you and sends you on a whirlwind tour of wherever you're trying to market your book. But it sounds, you know, it's, from what you guys are saying here, to me, it sounds like there's a lot going on there. And that essentially it's kind of like, well, what did, I think Orla, did you say, or maybe it was you, Sue, that said it's like having a baby.
Yeah.
I'm still raising my children. My youngest just turned 19, you know. So I guess let's talk about the work after the book. I mean, so we get the book published. Oh, Tom's going to join us. Yay. Well, now we'll be nice to him if he starts talking funny, because he's under a lot of pain medication.
That's all right.
So we published the book, and let's throw out a couple of ideas for people in terms of, okay, the book is published, or I'm getting the book published, because you don't want to start your marketing like when the pages hit the print. You need to start marketing before. As a matter of fact, when you're even thinking about, like, I'm at a stage where I'm finishing up some editing. I'm actually going to hire an editor to help me. And I'm thinking, okay, I can't wait until she sends back the revised, or not revised, but her
edits,
her analysis. I need to really think about, what am I going to do now? How am I going to start building my audience now, so that when the book comes out, they're like, oh yeah, I got to have this book. So what are a couple of things that people need to start doing now? And Tom, welcome. How are you doing, my friend?
Surviving.
Hi, Tom.
Hooray! Good for you, Tom.
You look pretty good for a guy who just had surgery.
The stitching and markings all over my shoulder here.
Oh,
thank you for sparing the visual.
Thank you.
Yeah. I mean, this is bad enough, so you don't need the rest of
it. Well, thank you for joining. We were just talking about the difference between self-publishing and getting a traditional publisher. Now, you self-published your book on sustained leadership. Is that right?
Well, I did more of the what do you call it?
Hybrid?
I want to say mezzanine level publisher. Had I self-published, I would have had to do everything myself.
Yeah.
And if I'd gone with a traditional publisher, I would have lost all the rights to my book, because you essentially assign the rights over to them. And since I didn't write the book to sell books, I wrote it to promote training. I didn't want to have to go play Mother May I to use all of my own material every time I did a class.
Yeah.
So the way I went was with a company that does all of the messy background stuff. They got it registered. There's some registration you have to make so that libraries can properly catalog your book. And if you're not registered there, they won't stock your book in their library. But they took care of that. They took care of the distribution agreements through all the different outlets, half a dozen of which I'd never even heard of. They prepared all of the electronic versions. They told me there were over 60 different electronic versions if you wanted to cover the waterfront. And they took care of all that. Meanwhile, I get to keep all of my rights. This is my book, lock, stock, and barrel. But it also carries a financial obligation, because with them doing all that work, I had to essentially pay for that service. To me, that was completely worth it. It's now on essentially, which is like most books these days, it's print on demand. And so you can go to any of the major booksellers, Barnes & Noble, Amazon, they've all got it. Or I should say they all have access to it. And in that way, I was able to get the stuff I am the least proficient in doing off my plate, and keep my focus on the book, marketing the book, basically marketing the training, which then sells the book. So there is a name for it. It's not mezzanine, but it's how I think about it. It's that mid-level where I don't have to do all the self-publishing stuff myself, but I get to keep all my rights.
Yeah.
Right. And don't you feel like that was an investment, you know, not just that you spent this money and then didn't see something for it, but that it was more of an investment to do it
Absolutely.
that way? Yeah.
Yeah.
They also did all the cover art.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Very
I
nice.
suppose, Tom, what you're talking about sounds exactly what I've done. I suppose I started off as an author and made loads of mistakes, and it's only purely by accident I stumbled into, you know, getting on an entrepreneur program that took my idea into a viable business. So again, over the years, my services have had to evolve based on, you know, what clients were looking for, you know. So, you know, absolutely, it's very important that, you know, you have the balance between you having full rights, but yes, you pay for it and all the messy stuff is taken care of. And I suppose that's why I do all the book formatting, you know, account setup and all that. And I have a designer who works doing the cover design and the editing, because there's so many nuts and bolts. I'm very much like a very hands-on project manager. And, you know, people say, do not outsource everything completely. And I don't, because I need to stay grounded and connected and know what it's like, you know, how all the bits and pieces feeds in together, because the book publishing industry is constantly evolving. What was working before isn't working now. And, you know, I find I have to keep up to date and keep my skills up to date all the time as well, because otherwise, you know, I won't know other ways I can add value. And I think it sounds like thankfully everything worked really well for you and you're not one of the horror stories, and I'm delighted it's been such a positive experience for you. And I have a feeling there's more books in you, definitely, because you had such a good experience, you know.
Well,
So
everything you said, I would much prefer to have 10 to 20,000 copies sold by now, which is not the case. But there are a lot of reasons for that, and many of them point back to me, and I get that.
Mm-hmm.
yeah. But are you using your book? Are you using your book to sell training courses, or is it the other way around? Which?
The design of the book was to, it's a long book. It's 678 pages long. It's
Oh
very
wow.
comprehensive on the subject, and it is much more similar to a textbook than something you sit down and read over a weekend. In fact, there were discussions with the publisher of whether or not to put it in their textbook division. And I fought against that because they would have put a price tag on it 5 times what it is.
Yeah.
And unless I could get it into a classroom, I'd never sell 10 copies. So I pushed back on that. It's got a sticker price of $39.99. Typically, Amazon's selling it for about $25, and that's all very doable and marketable within the market framework it's in.
Can I ask you a question? Did you ever think of, because it is huge, 600 pages, is there any way you can actually just create shorter ebooks from the content?
Everyone who has heard that story has asked that exact same question.
Mm.
And there were many discussions about that. At one point, it was thought to be best as, you ever see those sets of books that come in a little box?
Box sets, yeah.
Yeah, there was some discussion of doing it like that.
Mm.
The publisher is not a fan of that because it increases their costs tremendously. And I get that. My issue was one of approaching leadership development from a direction that it had never been approached before. You type in leadership into Amazon, you're going to get 2 million responses. Yeah. And so how do you distinguish yourself from that? And the way it came about was I said, I want to do something different with leadership, because whatever we're doing isn't working. What would be better? And having some project management, contract management experience, I latched on to the concept of a work breakdown structure. And in a project, you define your project by its work breakdown structure. When you complete all of the tasks in the work breakdown structure, you've completed the project. So I asked myself the simple question of, if I were going to build myself into a better leader, how would I do that? How would I build myself a better way? It fed straight into a work breakdown structure, and that's how it's built. once I had that framework and realized it was going to be big, I have 229 different elements of leadership described in this book.
Oh, wow.
And so it's very comprehensive. And my concern at that point was, because it's never been done before, if I leak a little bit of it, some professor with far more time on his hands than I have is going to steal it and run with it. And again, long discussions with my publisher, but I pushed on the fact that I wanted to basically claim my turf. I wanted to say, this is the entire work breakdown structure for building a leader. The intent then was to do follow-on books, exactly as you're describing, that focus on an overview or a particular segment or those kind of things. And for a variety of reasons, even though the next one in the series there's a draft of it, let me put it that way. And I love the title. It's called The Leadership Puzzle, Finding and Filling Your Missing Pieces. Dovetails perfectly into the WBS structure. That one hasn't seen the light of day yet.
Okay, it's just the reason I'm thinking of is that book on Amazon. Is that your only book on Amazon, or are there other books belonging to you on Amazon?
That's the only one I have that's currently in print.
Okay, it's just me just thinking. What's that? Sorry.
I was just saying, you will find some of my old books in the used section from time to time.
Okay, I'm just even thinking in terms of like a numbers game. The more breadcrumbs you send out, the more chances you have of being found, okay? And say, for example, you had just say your book into parts, okay? Because your book sounds like it's massive. It sounds amazing, to be honest with you. And it's just say, if you were to actually have it as, as a series, okay? So say, for example, the first section is say series 1 of such a book, okay? Amazon, and then the follow-up little sections are all section 2 or series 3, same series but different book numbers, okay? Amazon will link them all automatically together, so if somebody buys one, Amazon automatically knows to recommend the next one, and then the next one, and the next one, and they can all be linked together and found naturally and organically that way. And it's also more breadcrumbs. You're actually leaving more trails for people to connect with you and find you. The more books you've out there, like it's a numbers game, but it's a numbers game when you already have the quality there. It's not like I'm saying throw out trash to be found. You already are a professional, and it sounds like I can see how you're talking about the integration of the whole, but it still sounds like that even when somebody's reading your book, they're not reading in one sitting, that even in smaller parts, digestible parts, it's still a very valuable book. And a smaller book, even an ebook by itself, can be either individual ebooks or you could do a digital box set. It sounds still like you'd be adding massive value in each book regardless, to be honest with you.
I'm completely agreeing with everything you said.
And this would be
eating me to death. I will be happy to fulfill all of that. And Anna knows, she and I have been chatting about this for some time.
Yes, we have. And let's take that discussion and let's put it at the broader. I mean, this is great because we have a tremendous example of how we can take content and we can repurpose it. We can repackage it in a way that is good for marketing, because that was the question when you jumped in, Tom, that we were looking at. How do we begin to get the word out with the intent that we have for the book? So we were talking about, you don't wait until publication. So I'm sure that you were not waiting until the publication was in process as you were already beginning to market your book. And that is particularly Sue's expertise. So yes, after listening to all of this, Sue, what would you, if somebody came to you with Tom's situation, and we're not trying to target you, Tom, I'm just trying to get this a broader conversation for other people who probably have a large book and they're like, but it's just sitting on my shelf. It's sitting in Amazon doing nothing.
Right. And there's a lot of different ways to approach that. And I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on that today because next week's Twitter chat I know is about book promotion. And so I don't want to give it all away. but broad terms in a situation like that with a large book, you know, I agree with Orla that, you know, being able to put it in bite-sized, kind of digestible, smaller books in a series, if possible, is a great idea. Other ways to market that kind of a book, you know, and Tom may be already doing this, but again, we're kind of looking at the broad picture of making sure that you're blogging regularly and sharing information from that book in a blog into your email newsletter, and also on all of your social media sites, sharing those tidbits of information that are found in the book that pique people's interest so that they want to, you know, come to it. If your book is more of a textbook, kind of like what Tom's is, and it sounds like Tom's would be great in a way to market to community colleges even, or maybe even universities. I have another client right now who is trying to market some, not a book so much, but some other online learning tools, if you will, to leadership, strategy, entrepreneurship professors. So there might be an opportunity there to reach out to some sort of, you know, professors at the college level, community or university, that might be willing to use your book in a class and purchase books that way. I know a dozen years ago or more, I wrote a book for online virtual workers, and it's being used still in a community college back in Illinois. They make regular orders, you know, every semester. Not a whole lot, but it's something. So there's that as well. Just an idea.
Add another area that I've tried to push, but not with any great success. The corporate sales, where I try to get into a company and try to get the CEO to buy, you know, 500 copies for his executive staff, or 100 copies or whatever. I've not pushed it with the publisher, but my understanding is I can actually get them imprinted if they buy enough. You know, this is with the company logo and all that for the ones that you buy.
Right.
So, you know, I've explored these marketing opportunities. It's just not been something I've met with great success.
Yeah, and book marketing is always, you know, it takes a lot of work and it takes time. And there's so much out there. It's hard sometimes to break through unless you know, have a connection that kind of gets you in there.
And as Orla commented, and it's dynamic. It changes. What worked last year could be useless this year.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just as I've been listening to all the conversation, you know, the first thing that Orla mentioned, that you mentioned right off the bat, was the whole thing about the rights. When you publish through a standard publishing house like Penguin or Harper or Schuster and Schuster, you lose the rights to the book. And I think for somebody writing, that would be very tragic. You know, you've put your heart and soul into this book. You want it to represent you, and then you get it back and you go, huh, gee, who wrote that book? You know?
Yeah.
I think that that's a really important part. Now, let's talk a little bit about self-publishing, whether you're doing it all yourself or you're using a hybrid model like what you did, Tom, and what you do, Orla. What are we looking at in terms of costs just for a self-publishing, if you're going to use somebody like yourself, or if you're willing to share some of the costs that you incurred when you did your publishing, Tom?
Okay. The deal I struck, where I kept all the rights and they did a whole bunch of the background stuff, was in the neighborhood of $5,000 total. And again, that included the cover art and the layout and the, you know, all of that stuff. And I thought that was very reasonable based on what I was looking at in the market at that time.
Mm-hmm. Orla?
Yes, and
Sorry, I'm so conscious. I'm always talking so fast, so I'm putting my hand under my chin to keep quiet. So Sue, please go ahead, Sue. I'm always jumping in, so please go ahead, Sue.
well, I'll just say one brief thing and then I want you to jump in, but I was just
Okay.
going to say, like along what Tom said, I worked for years with Authority Publishing, which is a hybrid publisher. And I don't know their exact pricing anymore, but I know that it was anywhere between $5,000 and $10,000, depending on what the author needed, you know, but they would do everything like Tom said. I mean, they had editors, proofreaders, cover designers, layout people, putting it up on Amazon or through Ingram Spark, you know, so that the whole thing, it was like having a traditional publisher, but they didn't have to give up any of their rights. They kept it all. They had, you know, full input on book cover design, on how it was laid out, everything. And like Tom said, you know, it was an investment for him and it was well worth it. So, but you are going to look at spending a few $1,000s usually, or less.
Yeah, and you know, it's funny that you even say that, because sometimes people think if they pay an awful lot more money that they're getting more value or they're getting a better service, and they're not. It just means that some people are just charging a lot, and maybe they're charging a lot because they know the amount of work they're going to do for the person, okay? Or else maybe they're just have an inflated price because they want the perception that they're getting a priority bespoke project, and they're not. They're being sold the idea, and I don't like businesses that actually use a sales pitch to sell a service, as opposed to, you know, dealing with somebody who's actually working in the field and can actually answer questions for you. Yes, you're right, it does take a few $1,000s, and I know I earn every penny that
Yes.
I have.
Oh yes, it's a lot of work.
The deep facial scars to prove, you know. But it's because I am so personally invested in my authors. I read everything I publish because I don't want them to make mistakes, or I don't want them to say something that can get them into trouble, or something that doesn't make sense. So even if it's a genre I don't read, I make myself read them because it's important. And you know, I do pick up mistakes. I do pick up things that need to be fixed, whether it's fiction or non-fiction. And particularly for business book publishing, because I'm self-employed myself, I work for myself, I really do get to know the person and their book and say, okay, well, how can I add more value than just publish? So I always look at their website and look at ways that maybe added value can be added in, rather than me just saying, okay, here's the document, I'm publishing it. I am focused and concentrated because I think it's so important that the experiences we share with each other and we give to each other have to be meaningful and authentic, you know. And I think that's kind of what keeps us all going. Sue as well, lovely, genuine person. And again, I think people always have to follow the gut. I think before we were saying, oh, don't follow your gut, but I think you do need to follow your gut instinct. And you know, if you're ever offered a contract that doesn't seem to make sense or doesn't sit right with you, I know any times I have never followed my gut instinct, I've been led astray, you know. So I think we need to kind of get back to, you know, what's in here as well, you know, because there's a little voice inside that will guide us. And I think as well, you know, what you send out to the universe, you know, always, I think people actually come into your field that are meant to be there at the time, and you know, whatever you send out, good will come back. Yes, there are times there are unscrupulous people. I've been duped myself. I have been conned myself, and I am determined that not in my watch, anyone on my shift, not going to happen to them. You know, and I think that's very important. That it has self-publishing has to be a positive experience for the author. It has to be.
Yeah, I would agree. I would agree. Any last bits of advice, wisdom that you would share with would-be authors who are looking to get published in the near immediate future?
I would think, yeah, Sue, go ahead first, yeah.
I was just going to say they should have a conversation with Orla first.
Oh, no, they wouldn't get a word in, I'd be just talking. But I think most of the authors who come to me rarely know much about self-publishing. So I take them through the process, and I'm there to answer questions that they may have, okay? A lot of the time they feel, oh, it's a stupid question, or I can't ask that. And, you know, I think there are no stupid questions. You have to enter something totally knowing, you know, I suppose what your role as an author is as well, what the publisher's role, what to expect, what not to expect, and how to actually, you know, make it so that the stress is taken out of publishing, and that that they have the full rights, and also that they have access to their accounts. Now, some publishers set the accounts up in the publisher's name and just give royalties. I suppose I set up all the accounts in authors' names and give them full video training on everything. So it has to be something where the author at the end comes out empowered and say that was a positive experience, you know. And again, for them to, you know, read around the subject, and if they're offered any contracts, I would say, look, just do a little bit of research, you know, and check out some reviews and get contracts checked, because, you know, there should be no hidden costs. If there are additional costs, they need to be laid out. But some authors find themselves on a conveyor belt going nowhere, and they have to just keep paying to get the next level of the service and the next part and the next part, and I don't like that.
Tom, what would you offer to would-be soon-to-be published authors having your own experience?
Well, I agree with everything the ladies have said here. I think reading the agreement and understanding the agreement is important. You know, I've joked at times that a lot of people treat the Bible and the Amazon agreement the same. They never read it, but they check, I agree.
Yeah.
We are too ready to do that because we've been trained digitally to do that. In book publishing, that's extremely unwise. Of course, my background in legal training tells me you always read the contract, and I irritate the heck out of people, including a bunch of nurses last week who kept handing me consent forms, and I said, let me read it. And they were like, what? You want to read it? Just sign. I just need your signature. I said, no, that's not how this works.
No, you're right.
But what Earl said about the contracts and agreements, definitely read them, understand, get help, hire your own lawyer, whatever you need to make sure you understand what you're getting into.
Well, again, thank you all for all of the wonderful wisdom that you shared, your experience, Tom. That was really valuable. Orla, thank you for sharing. And no, you did not talk too much. Your power and your passion came through. And of course, Sue is going to be our co-host next week, because we're going to be really talking about book promotion. All of these are steps. But like you all said, putting out a book does not automatically make you a best-selling author. And so we need to look at, how do we build our tribe? How do we get people to want to buy this product, this fruit of our labors? And we want to get it into their hands so that they can benefit from the wisdom and knowledge that we have. Thank you so much, everybody. And
thank you.
You know, join us again next week. We'll be on Twitter at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time talking about book promotion. Thanks a bunch.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, everyone. And it was a pleasure to talk to you.
It was nice meeting you, Orla.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye now.
Bye.